Welcome to today's episode of the Heaven and Elle podcast. I am your host, Elle Edwards, and this one is another one that is quite exciting to me because I think some of you who've been listening along for a little while will know that about 7 weeks ago, God answered my question. He answered my request for an acronym, and he really explored and expanded for me, and therefore for you, what he means by Youier. Now, I cannot take any credit for this word. It's a word that I discovered via a John Ortberg book about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's been unpacking since then. But one of the things that he's been niggling me about a lot recently is the importance of the IER. After showing me what the IER meant, the importance of it. So the IER is intentional expectant relationship. I know you've heard me talk about this before, some of you, and so that's not new to you. But the piece he's been really stirring my heart around is actually that's where we start. And so the Youier book, which I mentioned very briefly in passing yesterday, I wrote the introduction last night, which I'm quite excited about. But when I was sitting with Holy Spirit yesterday morning and going, okay, well, if there's going to be a book, whether it's a book or a journal or whatever that looks like, where do we start? And the piece he reminded me of again this morning is that IER. There is some statistic, and it came up in a podcast interview I did yesterday. This gentleman said that about 90% of people don't do any work towards self-development or figuring out who they are or purpose or any of that stuff. I don't know if that stat is true or not, but that leaves 10% of the population. Let's work on the assumption that it's true. That leaves 10% of the population who are doing that thing. And that's great because it's important to know who you are. However, the piece that Holy Spirit's been really niggling me around is it's really tragic when people sleepwalk through life. You know, that wide path that we've talked about before, this and then that. Do go to school, do well, get your exams, go get a job. This, the monotony, every single day, the same day after day, without questioning and going, well, is this what am I here to do? That piece, to sleepwalk through life, is a depressing thought to me. But even more tragic would be to invest your whole lifetime exploring who you are, the you, finding out who you are, be you, but doing it without the IER. So there are too many people who have latched on to be you, but they're not being Youier. And that IER is really, really important. Intentional, expectant relationship. And so when I sat down this morning and said to Holy Spirit, what are we exploring in the podcast today? He started off by saying intentionality. I was like, okay, well, that's quite a big word. I don't know how to spell that. What do you mean? He said choosing. It's a choice, intentional, expectant relationship. Choosing to accept the invitation to really explore what that looks like, and making space for it as well. One of the things I've shared with you before is I love, for myself and to advocate for others, that we allow space in our day for the magic, for the divine, for the unexpected little things that come up into a day. If we crowd our day with too much stuff and busy, to-do lists and one thing after another, there's no room for the magic. And yes, God can get your attention, but too often if we fill our days and crowd our days out with all of the things, not only will we get stressed, it allows less space for that intentional choosing to step into that relationship piece. And then the expectant piece, opening your senses. Because one of the things which, as part of my journey that I've shared with you before on the podcast, is I always thought, like, whilst I prayed the prayer when I was 12, loved into heaven in my 20s, and I knew that I have Holy Spirit, I had this mistaken idea that it was only really like prophets and super holy people who hear from God. And that word hear is a misnomer. Misnomer? I don't know. It's a fallacy. It's a falseness. Because actually God can and does engage with all of your senses. And so the expectant part of IER is actually expecting to hear from God. And we're using the widest possible definition of hear. I'm not going to say that you're only going to hear God through a big booming voice. For most people, that's not how he speaks. So it's about opening all of your senses and asking God to open all of your senses so that you can be aware of the way that he's whispering into your day. But even that word whispering, again, it implies sound. It's not always going to be sound. Sometimes it's going to be pictures. Sometimes it's going to be stories. It can be, we explored this before. There is nothing that God cannot use as a way to communicate with you and to share his heart with you. So that's the expectant part of it. And of course, then relationship. You in relationship with your creator, with your heavenly dad, your teacher, your confidant, your guide. That relationship piece is really what it's all about. And so the real reminder today, and the real plea from today, is please, if you're somebody who does, like lots of us, wants to know, who am I? What am I here to do? What's the point? What's my purpose? All of that stuff. That's really important. Like, I've been banging on about for this for years. You know, be you, be who God made you to be. It is the secret. It's not really a secret, but it is the answer to a joyful life, to you thriving, to you not being that like angry, depressed person that I was in my mid-20s. It allows you to step into a life where you can thrive, and your joy will bring salvation to the nations. But if you only stop at that piece without the IER, that's tragic, and I don't want that to happen to anybody. So you're going to hear me over the coming days and weeks and months talk about this more, because it feels really, really important. And there's so much stuff behind the scenes which I keep getting niggled around about just how important this is. And quite candidly and quite transparently, I a lot of the time go, okay, could you give that to somebody else, please? Because I'm just me in my four walls of my office, my lovely yellow office in a corner of South Wales. And he said, yes, I have been giving it to other people too. And so there will be other people who will equally be calling you into relationship with God. Be you in relationship with God. And it's just that the language that I am using is around that word youia. And so the delightful thing is, the more that we explore this idea, the more that we come across other people who are also encouraging you to be you. This is not new. You know, John Ortberg coined that word back in however many years ago he wrote that book. And it's fascinating to me that he actually did, I've said this before, him or his organisation owned youia.com. They were going to have courses and stuff to help you step into that. But it didn't go anywhere. And I wonder why. And part of me wonders, well, actually, maybe it's because he didn't have the IER. Like, he was doing with God. I'm not suggesting he wasn't. But at that time, at that moment in time, the fullest definition of youia wasn't ready yet, maybe. Who knows? We don't know. All we can do is step forward one piece at a time in relationship with God. And that's why IER, youia, not just be you, be youia, is so, so critical. And it's really like what you're going to hear me as my core message moving forward. And yes, we're still going to hear stories of God's love, because it's all tangled up and wrapped into relationship. But I feel like this is the piece which is so critical right now. And of course, there's that invitation. If you don't already have a safe space, a community where you can practice being youia, where you can ask questions, where you can do real life, the Itchy Soul Playground is that safe space. And I know some of the people who are watching and listening are already members of the playground, and I love having you there. But if you're not already a member, youia.com/join is where you can find out more and see if that would be a good fit. But more than anything, it doesn't matter where you do community. I would just urge you and encourage you. You don't have to play with this on your own. It is so much more fun when we do it together. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you. And I'm excited to see how this unfolds as we move forward. Have a delightful day, and I shall catch up with you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.